Yeah, they started sandbag you. So what? Because they knew what I was doing, and they would put it. They knew if they put it in front of me, they had me, right? So they sort of lent me the machine for a month while I was doing a They Live, and I remember having this moment of sampling, right? Because it comes with so many sounds, and that's what you build out of. And if you remember in one place in They Live, you go to the scene where you start seeing the billboards of sleep and money is your god and all this other stuff. And so there's subliminal voices under that when you see sleep. So I wound up sampling John Carpenter saying those words into the synclav. Now, I had heard what the Emulator 1 sounded like. I knew what the Emulator 2 sounded like. Now I had 100K sampling, and I recorded them, and I slowed it down. So I went from sleep to sleep. And I went, oh, fuck. This is beautiful. I got to have this. So, I had to finance the thing. I'm lucky I'm still married to the same person, because that thing cost more than the house we lived in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was out of control, but it was the machine, and so I embraced it. It became my giant emulator. So I didn't fool with the direct to disc recording till 4 or 5 years later. But just having I had 64 megs of RAM. Wow. My God, that was like, even at a high sample rate, it was like 4 minutes. So the whole phrases. In fact, that shows up in the score of Halloween 5, if you remember the opening. I now started to sample whole phrases of music and put them on one key. Instead of, usually we're like beep, 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 or ring, or whatever, an instrument. Now I'm taking whole strings of audio, like what I would have done with a tape recorder, but now I've got a tape recorder worth of RAM in one keyboard, and there's nothing to ever replace it. You don't want one, because it's a pain in the butt to take care of. It's like having a Bentley. But because it was an inventing palette, there are things in there that you'll never see again. And from a performance standpoint, and especially from a sound design standpoint, I mean, it's the only way to go, because you have separate envelopes on 4 different keyboards that you can stack simultaneously and twiddle and play and go. And it had its own sound. And also remember, that was a variable rate sampler, which is gone from the face of the earth. Now we use fixed rate sampling. So it literally slowed the clock down to make the new note, which then at the bottom got you a whole bunch of really cool digital garbage. Anti-aliasing was no longer working. You were down into the aliasing part, and it had these textures and this gritty shit. So, I devoured that thing.
Yes, there's quite a few sound designers that, the synclavier is definitely their secret weapon on things, and and of course they've. How do you feel about the one they've released in the Alteria? It's FM based.
I haven't played with it. I'm gonna get it and play with it. But there's only so many things you can do in one day. So right now. Back to currently, I just geared up on the Native Instrument Ultimate. I haven't played a third of that stuff. It's just all in there, but it's amazing. A lot of the stuff, I can't remember the evolution stuff and the kinetic metallic things. And so, now we've got guys who are out just making cool sounds in software thingies. And what was the last one they just came up with? It's like the ultimate FM synthesizer performance guy. There's a new one that just came out that they did. I can tell you what it was in a second if I look at it. The neat stuff you can get out of FM synthesis that's sort of making it a performance instrument. The idea is an organic performance synth. Funny side note talking about performance. I'm actually out playing my music again live. So I have a 1 hour set that I go out and I take my MIDI keyboard and my laptop and my guitar, and I have a VJ made a video of clips from all those movies. So I do a montage of all the John Carpenter scores as a live show. It's very popular. So and I'm now on display as a dinosaur composer at these horror movie conventions. And it's cool.
Well, I think it's amazing stuff. And if you ever bring the show to Denver, absolutely, please let us know. We'll bring the noise. But getting back to noise, can you tell us how you came up with Poltergeist sound effect?
It's a fun story. So the same two picture editors I started with on Star Trek, Richard Anderson and Stephen Flick, they're now on Poltergeist. And Poltergeist is being remotely run by Ben Bird, who's our Star Wars sound designer, the guy. But he's in San Francisco, so he needed an LA crew originally to do Raiders of the Lost Ark. So they were his crew in LA on Raiders, and then they get Poltergeist off of that. And so we're sitting in a room spotting sound effects for Poltergeist, and in the room is Steven Spielberg, Michael Kahn, and Frank Marshall. And it's a still before stuff, so we're at a movie-ola, we're running the movie, and we come to the scene where the little girl is now no longer in the room. She's going to be a voice only, right? And so Spielberg knows I'm the guy that's making the quote creative sound effects, so it's an eye-to-eye thing, and I say, well, Steven, you got any idea what you want it to sound like? He goes, Earth to Venus. Brilliant! Thanks, Steve. I get it. I go, that's cool. And I go, Earth to Venus, and I go out in the hallway after the session. I start to sweat, like, oh man, if I don't get this right, I'll never work in this town again. I have no idea what this guy's talking about, but I'm going to go make one. And so I go back to my studio, and I spent about a week. At that point, I had a Eventide 949 harmonizer. So I tried to do as much as I could with the harmonizer, but it was coming out digital. It didn't sound real. And so on one of the drives from my house in Glendale down to Paramount to deliver some more, turn in some more stuff, I was working on other sound effects too, but this is my task, is this what we call the Carol Ann voice. On the radio comes Whole Lotta Love, Led Zeppelin. And if you remember in the break in the middle of it, the band breaks down and Robert Plant is going, you need my love. But there's a pre-echo. So you hear, you need my love, my love. I go, that's it, Earth to Venus. I get it. So what he was trying to communicate was, I want to hear the other dimension first, at least in my mind, and then the voice winds up here in the room and then goes off because it's going in and out of dimensions, right? So that was the inspiration. So I go back to the studio. I take the recording of the actress voice. I put it on my TX 8-track, put it on backwards, and at the time my reverb was a Furman spring reverb, kind of the same thing you have on a Fender amp, right? But it was just, I might have been in a Fender amp, I forget now. But either way, I had a spring reverb. So now I play the voice in reverse from the tape recorder into the spring reverb and re-record it on another channel, but under vari-speed. So it's not going, it's going, some crazy vari-speed of the recording of what was a constant to the reverb. And I start bending it around in spring reverbs. I do that in 2 channels, 2 passes in reverse, and I do one more pass forward. So I've now got four tracks. I got the original voice, 2 reverse reverbs, and a forward reverb. And now it's a quadraphonic effect that on the left and right is going, you mommy. And so that was the inspiration for it. I take it down, I play it for them, and they love it. I've saved the day. So
awesome.
Oh, that's freaking brilliant. That is brilliant, man.
I mean, you want to talk about really like thinking outside the box. There again, a lot of people will maybe be like, okay, and that's only because we have so many plugins available to us. So it's like, oh well, just stack, plug in, bounce, but you have to really think back to, okay, you didn't have any of these plugins, like none of this stuff. So, any special effects and things like that, you're really having to think outside the box.
Yeah, that varying the speed of the tape, the reverse reverb aspect of it is totally brilliant, but varying the speed is even like that little touch to it gives it so much more of an eerie, like like things are trying to push through, but they can't.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing.
And it was so high profile because you've got a scene where one important character is not seen at all. It's only the sound of her voice that has to sell where she is and what's going on. So there's a lot of it's like you had to deliver, and finally inspired by Led Zeppelin, but then modulating off of that. Oh, and it's funny after story. So I ran into the recordist. At first, I thought the effect was an error, a tape error. So I don't know if you've ever played with analog tape, but if you print your signal very, very hot, there has a thing called print through. So the signal from the first lap will bleed to the second lap, and you'll get kind of echoes in there. And I thought it was echo, and I think it was Al Schmidt might have been the recordist. Might have been. I could be wrong here. But anyhow, I met him in a session. I told him my story. He goes, "Oh no, it's not print through." He says, "What happened was there was another take on a set of headphones on the floor when Plant was recording a take. So there was a little bit out of sync. Another version was in the distance, but on a set of headphones laying on the floor that bled into the take they're recording, and they loved it and they kept it. So that was the idea of it even being there was an accident in the studio for Led Zeppelin. So an accident on an accident with an accident is how you got there. So back to
very cool.
Oh, I can't take it. It's so freaking brilliant. It's so brilliant. That accident factor, man.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about.
Well, I think that's why people like to go back to knobs, because you twisted a knob and you didn't know what it was going to do, but you twisted it and it did something. Whereas I kind of feel sorry for a guy that approaches a software version of a Prophet or a Mini Moog or whatever, and he's with a mouse doing this stuff, but he can't multiply, do a lot of stuff. And if you didn't understand what the machine did in the first place, how do you know what it's going to do in a software version? Whereas for me to approach a Prophet 5, I know what every one of those knobs do because I twiddled that knob. And luckily, the software is made to imitate exactly what it is, or like a 2600 or 2600 software synth. I use the Arturia stuff, but the Native Instruments stuff is also very good. But either way, to approach them in software, I know what the analog is. So I've got a prior education of what the thing used to do and what I want to do with it, versus just walking up to something you've never seen before and trying to get accidents out of it. I mean, all you do is junk out of it at that point. So it's just the nature of something's missing. Hence why people are going back to the mod. The whole Eurorack thing, I think, is brilliant and way fun to go back to it. But you had touched on it before. Do you have time to fool with all that stuff in production? It's almost like that's got to be your hobby. You put it off on the side on late Sunday night when you don't have to do anything. You can fool around with it and have some fun. But using these tools in what we'll call a high velocity environment, things are happening very fast, and you got to turn it in by tomorrow. In fact, sometimes you got to turn it in this afternoon, and they just told you they needed it in the morning. You got to have your stuff that you can just walk up to it and deliver. So that's where the digital stuff wins.
Yeah, and it's almost tragic. It's back in the day, we would have killed to been able to recall things as quickly as we can now. But at the same time, it generated something that was so unique. And I don't feel like we would have, it would have been something else. But it had its place in its time, and it served its purpose extremely well. And I would love to have, somewhat of that balance back. And that's something that we've been really striving to do is balance it out. Taking the best of the recording of computer technology to be able to record things and manipulate sounds we never thought possible. But at the same time, we're going back and recording the original instruments that made these sounds. And fortunately, we try to schedule things enough to where we have time to do that, but we don't have enough time to really dig around as much as we wish we did. But it's amazing. So I think the balance is really important.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see that, again, with the whole resurgence of, the 80s sound and movies and everything like that, becoming very popular, just like Stranger Things, on Netflix, and the sound design that went into that. Turbo Kid. Yeah. All of these sounds are very much, obviously from the 80s and using analog synths and recreating that sound and kind of simplifying things down a bit, from being so massively complicated. It's just like, just get some simple things that just right to the point and
simple is hard though, man.
Simple is hard.
Very hard. And it's so easy to fuck stuff up by making it complicated, because it is so easy to make it complicated.
Very true.
And it's like, hold back, pull the reins, and everything that you've said, Alan, has been exactly, on point. And it's just fascinating to get your perspective on this, because it's something that we've been feeling the industry shift as a whole is doing. They're kind of getting back to the basics a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, and everything has a pendulum, right? It swings one way and it swings back the other way, and we learn from that exercise what is appealing, at least at that time, because back to sound effects. A lot of the early sound effects that I would get from Paramount and stuff were like from optical, and they were crappy, and that's why we went out and recorded all our new sound effects. But now those sound effects that we made then represent a period of taste. Like there's a 50s sound, just like the drummers, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. There's 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s sound effects. So if you want to make a movie that sounds like the 80s, you want to use 80s effects. You don't want to use current sounding effects. And there's certain sound effects that are gone. If you were to record Traffic in 1950, it sounds different than it does today. So Traffic is not just traffic. So you want to have the right period of traffic. In fact, I remember one of my buddies having to make 1920s Traffic. So he literally built from car-buys of antique cars a whole scene of 1920s Traffic. So he could have a 1920s Traffic, but he faked it because you can't go record it now, right? But he had to build these things, and I still see it happening ongoing. I mean, one of the movies I did that was really pushing the envelope for sound effects was Army of Darkness. I don't know if you remember that one.
Oh my God!
Another one that we forgot to talk about. That, yeah.
And so that had a long development cycle, because I forget the name of the technique, but the ability to make multiple Bruce Campbells, I think it was called Introvision or something like that, where literally he would get played back, but then he would be able to see on a screen the other one, and this was before all the digital shit again. So Bruce had to act with himself several times. Well, that was a very protracted process, and Bruce was very hands-on about the sound effects. I mean, he spent a ton of time in the studio with me designing effects, because the movie was taking so long to make that he was sort of like had some time to fool around. So he was way involved, almost to the point of being a pain in the butt with the sound design. So I was making temp dubs that sounded like finished movies, only to keep up with the edit. And then Sam was around sometimes at the end, but mostly Bruce was just with me the whole time. So we got to be buddies, and we spent a lot of time. And by then, this would be like 1989, 1990. I had my full flotilla. Synclavier was there, all the sound design tools, all the great reverbs, 24 tracking, stacking things, and all the sequencing you could do in the Synclavier itself. In fact, it's funny, I got so married to the Synclavier that when all the newer generation stuff started showing up, like Pro Tools and stuff like that, I didn't need it. I already had everything I needed. It took till like the 2000s, where now NAD had gone belly up. The thing was no longer in development, that Pro Tools and Software Synths sort of caught up to what the Synclavier was at least a decade earlier. So I tell people I fell into a Syncla hole. I was just down in my little pit here, and I didn't need new technology because I already had everything as far as I was concerned. So it took a while to finally unglue me from the Synclavier and get me back into all this other stuff, which I use now. Like I said, I use Logic as my main thing, and Pro Tools as my main palette. But there's all that doesn't invalidate all the other stuff that's out there. It's just taking the time to get chops so that you can walk up to the thing and in 5 minutes get what you want, instead of spending the time pulling down menus and trying things and this and didn't work and it's over here. There's that time is not available. I mean, I look forward to getting into Ableton and stuff like that, but I haven't. I just don't have the time. I mean, I needed a buddy that's an Ableton guru to sit down with me and set me up, and then let me go from there. All right, well, there you go.